The New York Mets and the Atlanta Braves have played 155 games this season. They have an identical 97 and 58 record. The division is tied with 7 games left to play. What is left for the Mets? We'll be discussing it on this edition of Locked On Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on Twitter at FinkelsteinRyan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. The state of my sanity at this point is being tested. For one, I'm sick. So if anyone is watching on YouTube as opposed to listening, you're seeing it, I'm sure. And if you're hearing me, you might hear a little bit of frog in my throat. That's why. We got a hurricane going on. I live in South Florida. For us, where I'm at, a lot of rain. But really the bigger thing is I'm supposed to be in Atlanta this weekend, and I don't know how I'm going to get there. I don't know if the game's going to be played there. And then I have to watch the Mets and the Marlins. And because I live in South Florida, I can't watch Jerry Blevins make his debut on SNY, which, judging by the reaction on Twitter, was the best part of what was an otherwise terrible game. And instead, I had to sit there and deal with the rain knocking out my satellite, being blacked out from watching the game, having to flip back between low-resolution TV, which no one wants to watch that, and Howie Rose calling the game. And the game that I was listening to and watching was absolutely terrible. So I'm frustrated recording this show right now. I just want to go to bed. But Locked On Mets, your team every day. We got to discuss what happened. And Carlos Carrasco is pitching himself out of a playoff rotation. It's just that simple. You look at his numbers for the month now, 4.15 ERA. But there was a start against the Nationals where he got knocked out in the third inning. 5 runs allowed, only 1 of them earned. That would significantly change his ERA if those runs had been earned instead of unearned. You look at his last 2 starts, gets knocked out against the Brewers, only goes 4. And now in this one, only goes 3. And I mean, in a game where you really have to win, I mean, each of these 5 games, or it was 5 games against the Marlins and the Nationals, were must win because you know what the Braves will do against those exact teams. They've already taken 2 from the Nationals. They'll be going for a sweep. They're likely going to get it. And if the Mets don't win on Wednesday, you're looking at going into that series against the Braves down this division. Otherwise, both these teams win. Everything is all squared up, which is maybe a fitting end to this season going into this final series, but a frustrating one considering the Mets have not relinquished first place in this division all year. It's been tied a couple of times, but they haven't given it up, and now they're in their greatest danger to do so, playing one more against the Marlins with Jesus Luzardo on the mound, a really quality young starting pitcher. And then you go into that series against the Braves. But in the first inning of this one, I mean, you just saw Carrasco didn't have it. The changeup was bad, was struggling to find the strike zone, was giving up hits. He hit a batter, gave up, 2 consecutive hits, then a sac fly to put the first run across, walked a batter, then a wild pitch will have the second run to score. He gets out of that inning, but in the third inning, he gives up the cheapest home run you can imagine. I gave up a double prior to that to put a runner on, and then J.J. Bleday hits one out that, I mean, it was as short of a home run literally could be at Citi Field. Yet that's baseball for the Mets when you play the Marlins in September. They're up 4-0. There is a quick moment of hope. When Pete Alonso in the bottom of the 4th inning hits a 3-run shot, you cannot blame Pete for what we're going to discuss in the next segment, which is a potential September collapse, because even though he struggled in the first couple weeks of the month here, he has really come on strong. He is now the first player in Mets history to have multiple 40 home run seasons. His rookie year, where he had 53, and this one with 40 now, increases his lead when it comes to the MLB lead in RBIs, 131. And the Mets were in it for half a second. But then Buck Showalter rides Trevor Williams too long, in my opinion. Didn't have anyone else up. It's weird because there's the game against the Brewers, the final game of that series, where he managed like it was the World Series. And then in this one, it was just sort of trying to get through it. Your bullpen's well rested. You had an off day on Monday. You have another one on Thursday. I get that there is a lot of uncertainty with this storm, but I don't know why he was so hell bent on sticking to Trevor Williams in that spot, especially when the bases were loaded. He ultimately gives up a hit that drives in two more, and that's essentially the ball game. Now, the lineup wasn't great in this one. I mean, only 7 hits, a lot of bad at bats, particularly in the last inning. Just 3 terrible at bats to close out the game. But it was a horribly pitched game from Carrasco to Williams. And here you are, you drop one to the Marlins. And if you don't win and you end up getting swept by them in this series, it just makes this September a little bit worse. And I've been a staunch defender of the New York Mets all season long. They answer the bell time and again. I still believe in this team, even if they end up being a wild card team. Having Jacob deGrom, Max Scherzer, Chris Bassett, that wild card round doesn't scare me. You can go and you win that. Anything can happen when you get into October, and this team can still get hot. They can beat the Dodgers. They can beat the Braves. They can beat the Astros or the Yankees. I still believe that. But they aren't closing this season strong, and it leads me to ask the question, is this a collapse? Is it? Because I think there's some evidence that we could point to that would say if they don't close out this division, considering how soft their schedule was, this is a collapse. We'll discuss that more in just a minute. But first, the summer is winding down. Nights are getting longer, but the breeze isn't the only thing that's getting stiff. That's right. This episode is sponsored by BlueChew. Guys, we all know that confidence can take you far in life. That's especially true in the bedroom, especially when it's time to step up to the plate. And that's where BlueChew comes in. They have a unique online service that delivers the same active ingredients as Viagra and Cialis, but in chewable tablets and at a fraction of the cost. You take them anytime, day or night, so you can plan ahead or be ready whenever the opportunity arises. The process is simple. Sign up at BlueChew.com, consult with one of their licensed medical professionals, and once you're approved, you'll receive your prescription within days. The best part, it is all done online, so no visits to the doctor's office, no awkward conversations, no waiting in line at the pharmacy. Blue Chew's tablets are made in the USA and prepared and shipped direct to your door in a discreet package. With Blue Chew, men everywhere are excited when the postman arrives because when your package arrives, your package has arrived. So if you could benefit from extra confidence when it's time to perform, chew it and do it. We've got a special deal for our listeners. Try Blue Chew for free. We use the promo code Locked On at checkout. Just pay the $5 shipping. That's BlueChew.com, promo code Locked On to receive your first month for free. Visit BlueChew.com for more details and important safety information. We thank Blue Chew for sponsoring the podcast. Is this a collapse by the New York Mets? Well, I'll read one stat that would really paint a compelling picture for why this really could be considered a collapse. In the month of September, the New York Mets have a combined 10-9 record against the Nationals, the Pirates, the Cubs, the Marlins, and the Athletics. Mets Daddy pointed that out. You can find him on Twitter at Mets Daddy 2013. But it's been a bad month, and you look at it, and they start the month closing out a series victory over the Dodgers. And remember where we were back then, and you felt like once you crossed that hurdle, the division was just laid out in front of you. And we saw the schedule, and it was the Nationals, the Pirates, the Marlins, the Cubs, the Pirates again. You had a series against the Brewers you were a little bit concerned about, a series in Oakland. You played the Marlins again. You had the Braves, and you closed out with the Nationals, and you felt like the Mets had this thing sewn up. What do they do from that point on? Well, they lose the series against the Nationals at home. They go into Pittsburgh, and they did win that series, but they lost the first game in blowout fashion after dropping the final 2 games against the Nationals. So that was the first spiral. They end up beating the Marlins in Miami. You give them credit for that, even though, of course, you're hoping that they sweep those types of series. So you're feeling decent in that they went on the road in Pittsburgh and Miami, and they won 2 series. So, hey, I applauded the Mets. I said, hey, you know what? They did what they're supposed to. Hats off to them. They got to keep winning series and you feel good. Well, they return home. They play the Cubs. They get swept, which when you look back on this season, to think of the games that were dropped and the fact that you could be 4 games up on the Braves heading into this series, that is where you could be had you taken care of business against some of these bad teams and you made it hard on yourself. Then the Mets, they go on a nice little run. They sweep the Pirates in a 4-game series. Incredible job. They extended to a 6-game winning streak, beating the Brewers first 2 games of that series to clinch the division. They clinched in the first game. They had a great comeback victory. We're feeling good about the Mets again. Well, then they lose that final game of the series in pretty bad fashion. They get shut out. Go to Oakland. There's the game where Jacob DeGrom was unlike his usual self, and the Mets were unable to beat the Athletics. So they take 2 or 3. Again, relatively speaking, no harm because they won the series, but to not sweep, I mean, outside of that one series against the Pirates, that really only got back for getting swept by the Cubs. I mean, just so many missed opportunities. They got this one now against the Marlins at home, 2 games set. Granted, tough pitchers in Lopez and Luzardo, but to lose this one and now put yourself at risk to be down heading into this final series against the Braves, it's frustrating. It really is. And, you know, with the uncertainty of where this series is played and the weather and all that, it's just feeling like a horrible ending to this season. It is. I don't know if that's just because I'm sick today. As if you're watching on YouTube, my eyes are welling up. um, it's just that game was so frustrating to me. If you watch the Marlins broadcast, any local New York Mets fans who local that sounded ridiculous. I apologize. South Florida locals who had to watch the Marlins broadcast. JP was it JPR and Seba? I don't. He doesn't deserve for us to know his name. The color guy of the Marlins was just twisting the knife the whole time, and so I am so frustrated right now. They lost that game, and that it was just another one of these outings where they are pressing and they're not playing with confidence. Meanwhile, I'm simultaneously watching the Braves pound the Nationals, and granted, way worse pitcher, and they're getting batting practice, but uh, they're showing so much more confidence, or at least tonight they did. You just wonder how this series is going to shake out this weekend between these two teams, because it all comes down to this. We knew that even if the Mets lose tomorrow and the Braves win and they're 1 game up, you win the series, you get the tiebreaker, and you would exit. Like, let's just say Mets lose against the Marlins, Braves win, Mets are down for the first time since April 12th or whatever it is in the division. They go out, they take 2 or 3 from the Braves this weekend. They would earn the tiebreaker. They'd pick up a game. They'd be even going into that final series. The Mets play the worst team in the Nationals. The Braves had to go up against a Marlins team that would have the 2 pitchers the Mets just saw, Pablo Lopez and Jesus Luzardo. And I would imagine, based on how things should slate out there, Sandy Alcantara trying to put a bow on a Cy Young case against him at the Braves. A game that, honestly, living in South Florida, I'd probably go to because that would be thrilling to watch, especially if the division was still up for grabs at that point. But you are just making it so much harder on yourself. And again, getting back to the question if this is a collapse, look, if they lose to the Marlins, all right, you're talking about going 10-10 against that light part of the schedule that we all were licking our lips. You know, we were chomping at the bit seeing it. Nationals, Pirates, Cubs, Marlins, Athletics. To go 500 against all those sub 500 teams, damn right it's a collapse. Again, does that mean that they can't go on and have playoff success? No. Does that mean that this season is suddenly a failure? No. It's one of the best regular seasons in franchise history. But it's still a collapse when it comes to winning this division, because when they beat the Dodgers, they were 3 games up of the Braves with an absolute cupcake schedule. And whether they got ahead of themselves, whether they looked at the finish line before they got there, whether they are pressing, they've been playing bad baseball this month. It's just that simple. And it's tough to think that they will go into Atlanta and show up. But this is also a Mets team that has risen to the occasion before and sometimes plays down to their competition and plays up to it as well. And maybe that is exactly what we would see when these two teams square off. I want to discuss that series a little bit because the Hurricane is certainly leading to some interesting contingency plans. Anthony DeComo of MLB.com laid them out for us. So I'll go through that in just a minute. But first, a quick word from our sponsors. At 9:40 p.m., Anthony DiComo posted an article to MLB.com, Major League Baseball discussing contingency plans for the Mets-Braves series. Basically, the short of it is Saturday seems to be a no-go to play baseball. 85%. Well, I'll just read the forecast from the National Weather Service that Tacoma provides in this article. Thursday, partly cloudy with wind gusts up to 30 miles per hour. Friday, a 40% chance of rain after 9 a.m., increasing to 50% chance at night. Saturday, rain likely throughout the day and night. Sunday, a 40% chance of showers. He then says that the options include shifting Friday's game to a matinee and or scheduling a split doubleheader on Sunday. Though not a desirable option, the teams could also make up one or more games on Thursday, October 6th, the day after the regular season is set to conclude. Those games are necessary to decide the NL East title. Let me say that last part again, though. Not a desirable option. The teams could also make up one or more games. So you're going to play a doubleheader the day after this season before a wild card round. So the Atlanta Braves, in all their wisdom, are so hell-bent on playing this series in Atlanta because they don't want to give up their home field advantage and their sellout crowds, which I'm supposed to be a part of, by the way. Just don't know how I can make it out there with a hurricane ripping through my state. They would rather, as opposed to the simplest conclusion, I said on yesterday's show, and I even said on Twitter today, coming to Miami made a lot of sense. They have a dome. The Braves will be in Miami on Monday. The problem there is traveling through the state with the hurricane. So I get that. If you don't want to come down to Miami because of the hurricane, makes sense. Go to Texas. Texas, they got a dome. They're pretty much cleared this thing. You can fly from Atlanta to Texas. The Mets can fly from New York to Texas. Won't have to worry about the rain. You play the baseball games without having to worry about this. It makes no sense whatsoever that you are going to. I mean, look, the best case scenario is a 40% chance of rain on Friday and a 40% chance of showers on Sunday. And you want to play a doubleheader? I'll tell you, the storm isn't really supposed to be to where I'm at, I guess, until at some point late tomorrow. And we've been getting rain nonstop for the past 48 hours. So magically, you believe that some bubble is going to protect your stadium? Well, you could have thought about that when you had the chance with a brand new ballpark built less than 5 years ago to put a retractable roof like any logical team should at this stage. It should be mandated by Major League Baseball in 2022 that every new ballpark has a retractable roof. You love the beauty of the outdoors, keep it open all the time. But when it's raining, you can close it up and play baseball games. And now you really want to go into this series and just say, yeah, we'll try to squeeze one in on Friday on an extremely wet field. And then Saturday we can't play. Then Sunday we're going to. Why? When you could just go to Texas, be clear of all of this, play baseball games on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Let these two teams go head to head, which is what really matters. And then you close out the season as planned, get into the playoffs. The idea that they would be so against playing a 163 this year if there was a tie, and now Major League Baseball is willing to maybe play a doubleheader on that same day that they didn't want to play games to decide the best division race in their sport before one of those two teams has to go out and play the Phillies in the wild card round is absolutely ludicrous. And to think that the Mets would maybe have to play a doubleheader where they have to decide, do we start Jacob DeGrom and I guess Chris Bassett, because I don't think Scherzer would be ready if Scherzer goes on Sunday. Uh, but do we start those two guys and potentially burn them for a wild card round, and suddenly your wild card rotation is Scherzer, Carrasco, and Taijuan Walker? Or do you just pivot and almost punt the games and say we're going to go, Trevor Williams and David Peterson to save our rotation from the wild card round and just try to win with our bats? And do the Braves do the same thing? Now, instead of playing the best of the best, great pitching matchups, a great series on a dry ballpark that has a freaking dome in Texas or even Miami, whatever they decided to do, instead of doing the logical thing, the fact that they're even debating this is everything wrong with Major League Baseball, in my opinion. It really is, because it always boils down to the money. And God forbid the Braves had to refund some tickets that they sold out, and they have to go play in a neutral site. Play the baseball games. Let's honor baseball with Major League Baseball. Let's prioritize that over the money for once. But the reason why this season is pushed back is because there was a lockout where Major League Baseball continued to put their pocketbooks first rather than the game. And so, whatever, here we are. Here we are at this point where no one knows what the heck's going to happen. And we're just waiting to see what they decide. Um, Hopefully, the weather cooperates, everything turns, or whatever needs to happen, and they can squeeze this series into Atlanta if they're so hell bent on it. But it just, to me, makes zero sense. Regardless, not my decision to make. That's going to be all for today's edition of Locked On Mets. As always, thank you for listening. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Now for your second listen, check out Locked On MLB, hosted by Paul Francis Sullivan. Locked On MLB is where we go to step today with everything going on in Major League Baseball. You follow Locked On MLB wherever you get podcasts.